Alright guys, Dokkan time, and Broly and Gogeta are finally here for 9th anniversary on Global. So this is kind of a revisited how to build guide, as my previous build guides were under the old format. So we're going to go through these guys again here for Global specifically. So on the right side, you'll see that I have several different builds. There is quite a few different ones in there, I will say. Primarily, there's a speedrunner build that I threw into there just because I know people were going to want it. And then there's a normal build. Then there is also the 55% build. The 55% build, you can see, is a focus on additional. I think that's the best way to go if you have only a 55% copy. Meanwhile, if you get two dupes, you know, go for the full additional still, and then kind of pick or choose if you want to just throw the rest into crit or into dodge. And then give them a defense equip. But if you're going to be a speedrunner, you know, go for the crit, of course, because you're speedrunning. You got to get that damage in there. Go for the damage orb and full additional. So that's the kind of thing right there. I know that most people won't go for the speedrunner build, but there's some people that do that, you know. Personally, I'll be going for the recommended one right here, level 20, and then level 6 on dodge or crit. I haven't decided yet, but I will be giving him a defense orb personally. So let's go over his kit real quick. And then after that, I'll go over his slot suggestions as well. So, he has technically a lot of 200% options, but he doesn't at the same time. The only teams I would recommend running him on is probably Rose and then Super Saiyan Vegeta's lead. Mostly because of his domain. The domain thing is just a huge thing that we'll get into, but I'm going to try and keep it short as possible. So he's a super bosses, transformation boost, and full power key plus 3 170 lead. And then he 30% to 200% boosts explosive anger movie boss category units as well in those categories. He does stack attack on his 12 key and then raises defense for 1 turn. He greatly raises attack and raises defense for 4 turns on his 18 key. He does have an intro animation, of course, for 4 turns, key plus 5, attack and defense plus 100%, and he launches on a free additional super. So after 4 turns, if you do not transform Broly, he will lose that 100% attack and defense, and he will lose that free additional super. So beware of that when you're double leading Broly. Attack and defense 150, guard against all attacks, key plus 1 per key obtained, an additional attack plus 50% when launching a super, and an additional defense plus 50% when launching a 18 key super, ultra super. Key plus 2 launches another additional super attack when attacking as the first or second attacker, and then key plus 6 launches an additional super attack and 50% chance to launch an additional super when attacking as the third attacker. So this means that in the 3rd slot, you could see him, let's see here, within the first 4 turns, you could see him base super, intro super, and then triple super in the 3rd slot with a potential for a 4th additional super, and then hidden potential quad penta super. So he could penta super in slot 3 potentially. Or you could just go for the standard 1, 2, 3, and potentially 4 in slot 1 or 2. I would suggest running Broly in slot 2. I know a lot of people take the guard and damage reduction that you will see in his transformation very seriously, but at the same time, it really just depends on who you're fighting. Most of the time, you can probably run him in slot 1, but slot 2 is where he's at. So he does have a domain, he can which once he transforms and activates his domain for 4 turns, key plus 4 to all extreme allies, and extreme class allies enemies attack and defense plus 10%, and an additional attack and defense plus 10% if they are also in the explosive anger or movie bosses category. And then superclass allies and enemies damage received plus 10%. So this is the big reason why it's really difficult sometimes to run Broly. He's a Super Saiyan. Super Saiyans are a very good category. Unfortunately, outside of running extreme transforming Saiyan Vegeta, most of the other Super Saiyan-esque units are actually going to take a lot of extra damage, and you really do need to take into consideration of that when you run him on a Super Saiyan's team. I would highly suggest just activating him to finish off the enemy, not necessarily use it while during like bigger parts of the fight. That would be my suggestion moving forward. So when he does transform, and when he transforms, he is crazy. He now raises attack and defense and then hits all enemies. So once he transforms, he AoEs. And then he greatly raises attack and defense for 1 turn on 18. He plus 6 attack and defense 300. Activate guard against all attacks. He plus 1 per key sphere. Reduces damage received by 26% before attacking while the domain alternate dimension space is active. So that is once again for only 4 turns. So once the domain goes away, he will lose that damage reduction, and then he will only have guard. More than likely, you will never hit a time frame of ever not having that open at the same time. More than likely. Attack and defense. Basically, attack and defense. Okay, attack plus 50% when attacking, and then an additional defense plus 50% when receiving an attack. Launch an additional super attack. So he just gets a free additional crit hit chance plus 26% when launching a super, and then another 26% chance critical when launching an ultra super attack. So in total, he has a 52% chance to crit, which is why these builds do not really suggest crit, unless you're a speedrunner and you want to get the damage in right away, like turn 1. That is the only time you ever really need crit before transforming, other than to, you want to hurt the enemy harder. He does launch an additional super attack also on that 18 key super, and then he launches another additional super attack when key is at 24 or more. So you got your standard one, you then have your free one, and then your 18 key, and then your 24 key, and then your hidden potential. So that's a penta super potential in both transformation states of Broly. Very good, very crazy. Penta supering is one heck of a thing. We're going to go ahead and go take a look at Halvard's calculations. So 55% Broly. He doesn't look crazy unless he's like additionaling constantly. Like I said, I don't think he's really a slot 1 unit. He could be a slot 1 unit, but with intro 200k defense, I don't care if you have guard and 70% damage reduction. It can be very difficult to survive some attacks now that we're getting in the game. So I wouldn't say he's slot 1 material at that point. But, once he transforms, without support, start at turn 265. After receiving attack, he'll be at 400 start at turn. If you have support of 40% on the field at the time, then you will be at 400k defense. Now with guard and 26% damage reduction, 26% damage reduction isn't a huge amount, but I'd say he could survive a good amount of attacks. I don't know if he's surviving a 2 million super, but you will take some damage for sure. It really just depends on what the 2 million is coming from. Once again, though, I don't suggest this guy into slot 1. He can be in slot 1 depending on who you're fighting. It's circumstances. It's circumstantial. Be aware of the enemy you're fighting, of course. So he has pretty decent, good defense, with guard and damage reduction, 1,700,000. That's pretty decent, with the guard and damage reduction. But he is not immortal. I will not say he is not immortal. But this is 55%. So, let's go take a look at him when he's not at 55%. When you have double dupes with even just 1 stack of defense, I mean, freaking post super 800k defense, start a turn defense 400, with 40% support 500k defense. The dupes matter, man. Dupes do matter, I feel, and it really shows with Broly here. 500, almost 600k start a turn defense with 40% support. That's a huge leap from the what was it? Only 300 or 400 with 55%. Go back and look at that real quick. Yeah, on 55% with 40% support, you're only at 438. So you had nearly a 200k difference on the defense-wise there. So dupes do matter, guys. Dupes do matter. So if you only have the 55% copy, keep him in slot 2. You can be a little bit extra if you want to put him in slot 1 if you have double dupes or rainbow. But the last thing I wanted to go over with would be the slot suggestions, leaders and partners. So the thing about BROLY is that he's a super boss unit. Super boss is a relatively new category, and it's kind of a jambalaya of random enemies, and they don't usually mix very well. So finding him a good team, it's more like he's the showrunner, he's the star, you know, the spotlight's on him, and that's just kind of the way he rocks. So his ideal leader is honestly himself, and then at that point, the only other 200% leads I would suggest would be Vegeta or Rose. You can choose he has loads of other leaders that you can choose from. You do not have to choose those ones. It's entirely up to you. The leader choices I have on the roll tips is entirely just a suggestion. That's I feel his ideal spot and placements. As far as his partners go, partners are a little all over the place. You know, obviously he can link with himself on the physical version. And he does have some decent link partners with some of these other random units. It's just that most of these other units that he shares links with, he's not really rocking on the same team with too often. And if he is, you know, not a lot of these are slot 1 units except for maybe God Goku. So it's just kind of hit or miss. He's a Super Saiyan unit. He's got Super Saiyan links. So he's got Prepared for Battle, Shocking Speed, Fierce Battle, the Super Saiyan. You know, he's got those standard links, and that's why he links so well with them. But personally, in my experience, on a Super Boss's team, I would probably just suggest rocking him with Frieza in slot 1, or even just floating Frieza. Heck, rock him with CaiSamaX in slot 1. That's also a very decent option. The thing you want to do is find a slot 1 unit with him, and I would say Frieza or CaiSamaX, if you're on JP, would be your best choice. As far as global players go, I mean, you can rock BROLY Trio after you EZA them. As long as you give them 7 orbs in slot 1, you're perfectly fine. And then outside of that, you know, if global gets Topo, you could potentially throw Topo on the team. I don't think Topo's a terrible choice. Topo is a super boss, if I do remember correctly, isn't he? He's a super boss, right? No, he's not a super boss. Oh, never mind. Oh, yes, he is. Yes, he is. So you could throw Topo in slot 1. Topo is definitely a slot 1 unit. But yeah, it's just it's a little rough finding the perfect team synergy with BROLY. That is the hardest point. Like I said, I suggest slot 2 and 3 for this guy, but you can rock him in slot 1 if you have a sufficient amount of dupes, I feel. So, anyways, guys, let me know how you're going to build him, what you're going to use, what partners you're going to use him with, you know. Let me pull up one last thing here. Let me pull up one last thing for just getting... I want to make sure that you guys can see all of the build choices for him all at once. So these are going to be all of the build choices all in one spot right there for BROLY. So if you want it 55% far left, if you're a speed runner, go for the middle one. And if you want to go for a general, like all over, the best kind of build to go for his kit would be the one on the far right, in my personal opinion. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and have a good day and a good night.